Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Overflow. My name is Micah Curtis.
And I'm Melon Spalding, also known as The Hatman.
And the audio quality is not going to be as good today. Reason being is I'm in a car, and I forgot my headphones in the hotel, and Hat is also in a car, driving. So, yeah, basically, we're trying to make this as good as we can. So any echoing issues and things like that, I apologize. I'm going to try to do what I can to fix any of that. But I'm definitely happy to get back to this. I'm always happy to do anything podcast oriented, to be honest. Like, I enjoy doing vids and stuff like that, but the politics just the podcasts in general are more fun for me. They're a bit looser. I'm not as scripted, etc., etc. So, well, let's get started. So we're gonna start off with politics first today. And Hellblazer asks, do you think the rise of Donald Trump and populism can save the Republican Party from establishment rhinos? So, I think that something needs to be said here is that some people don't really know what populism is. So let's go to the definition. It is basically support for the concerns of ordinary people, support for concerns of the little guy. And given that this nation is what it is, oftentimes, as long as the public is vocal and your politicians are statesmen, populism is going to be a part of things. It's just a natural process. It's not a philosophy, which is something I think that needs to be mentioned because Steve Bannon was pushing the whole nationalist populist idea like it was some sort of new governmental philosophy, which again just basically says you love your country and you care about ordinary people. Not much of a philosophy, all things considered. It doesn't really say that much because you can be a socialist and be a nationalist populist. Hitler was a populist at first. Well, Hitler was kind of whatever he wanted to be, but that is oftentimes how a politician will portray themselves, as a populist. So it's not something that is like in some giant wave, because who's a couple of good people that kind of bought into the Bannonism? Nick Fuentes and what's the other guy's name? The guy who got his ass kicked by Michael Knowles on a show. James Alsop. So there's a couple of content creators that kind of bought into the Bannonism, and they still kind of spout that shit. And aside from
Moore in Alabama too.
Do what?
You got Roy Moore in Alabama too.
Oh, that's a good point.
Candidates as well.
Yeah, but and Roy Moore's failure, I think, is sort of a good example of how the Trumpy candidate is not necessarily what people are looking for.
Exactly.
So this whole, let me put it this way. It's not the rise of Donald Trump and populism that's going to get establishment rhinos to do their jobs or to get them away from certain things. Because you have to keep in mind, John McCain voted against Obamacare repeal when he ran on the position for re-election in Arizona. Jeff Flake is the same way. So when it comes right down to it, there is no populist wave at all. People have largely rejected Trumpism outside of the man himself, because when you formulate an idea of how to do politics around one person, lo and behold, it only works for one guy. The only person that can be Trump is Trump. The only person it's the same thing with Democrats and Obama. The only person who could sell this Obama way of looking at things was the man himself.
The cult of personality.
Yes, exactly. So again, trying to base your everything around one person is foolish. That's why conservatives push conservatism, is because it's an idea, it's a philosophy that is supposed to last for, well, it has lasted for hundreds of years. You know, it's based on the ideas of the founding fathers, and as such, we try to adhere to that as much as possible, because some ideas last forever, and, you know, those where they came up with their ideas are rooted in the Bible and rooted in the Enlightenment. So, some people like to say it's one or the other. It is both. So yeah, it's the only thing that's going to save the Republican Party from establishment rhinos is adherence to conservative philosophy, and if people aren't doing their jobs, they need to be primaried.
Yeah, it's called holding your people accountable.
Exactly. So thank you, Hellblazer, for the question, but that's kind of the long and short of it. And I have a feeling that people are probably going to, now ask, like, what's my issue with Nick Fuentes and James Alsop? And a couple things. First, it's the blatant pandering to the alt-right. They say that they're not alt-right, yet they say that Jewish people are trying to replace white people in the United States. And, I mean, they were both in Charlottesville chanting that alongside Richard Spencer's people and Vanguard America and so on and so forth. So them trying to tell me that they are not alt-right rings hollow to me. Second thing is that, again, they bought into a perception of Trumpism sold by Steve Bannon that doesn't exist. You know, their view of nationalism is hollow. Their view of loyalty to the United States is hollow, because they seem to think that it has something to do with genetics. The United States is the first nation ever founded on a philosophy as opposed to a nation, and a pre-established nationality. It is a brand new country that has its own experiment, for better or worse, as all governments do. So it's not built on France being for the French, or England for the English, or Scotland for the Scots. It is about an idea of how a country should be ran and how a government should be ran. You know, and it reeks of the same sort of idiocy that young SJWs have when it comes to not knowing about civics and not knowing about their country. So I'm not a fan of any sort of nationalism that is basically, I love my country because it's my home, and I love my, and that's basically it. And my brain just kind of went out on me. But point being is that if your love of country is not based on what its culture stands for and what it has stood for as a nation, then you need to re-examine things, because your genetic stock, as they like to say, or what have you, does not form you as a person, no matter how much you would like to believe opposite. It is your actions that define you. Again, and I said this last time, I'll say it again. Genetics, all they can do is put forward a baseline. Everything else has to be developed. So. Well, that was a hell of a rant already.
It's cultural nationalism as opposed to an ethnic nationalism.
Yeah, you could call it cultural nationalism. You could call it civic nationalism if you want. I
prefer to call it patriotism. It just rolls off the tongue easier. And
exactly. Exactly. It gives you. One thing people kind of wonder is, like, you'll get people online that are kind of crazy that say, like, black people and white people can't live together. I'm like, I don't know where that comes from. But the reason that so many people of different ethnicities and backgrounds can come together and be neighbors is oftentimes a sense of national pride, an idea of what it means to be in this country, and what it means to defend it, what it means to live in it, what it means to learn about it, what it means to be active in it, and so on and so forth. And I think that there's just a lot of younger people on the internet that just don't have an understanding of that at all. And because they don't know what the system works or how the system works, and because younger people these days are considerably more egotistical than when I was younger, they tend to assume that they have all the answers already, and Lord knows they sure as shit do not. All right, next question.
Let's move on.
All right. Autist Whisperer wanted to know thoughts on the escalation of animosity towards Russia over the attempted assassination of a turncoat, even though there has been no evidence of who did it. Hatman, I want you to take the lead on this one because I have no clue what's going on there.
Okay, so more or less, TLDR, to cut it short, guy and his daughter were poisoned in the UK with the nerve agent, and turns out he was a Russian spy at one point. And what the prevailing theory is right now is that this was an attempted assassination ordered by Vladimir Putin himself. Currently, there is no solid evidence for this, at least that we're aware of. Nothing that's been released, and I certainly understand because, it's secret material and whatnot. But it seems to evoke the same sort of, I guess, fear and prejudice that the media has been on towards Vladimir Putin, especially since the election, or rather before that, even as soon as Hillary called him practically an enemy. It's all bets are off. Now we gotta hate Putin. But somebody brought up an interesting point on Twitter. I don't remember who exactly, but I gotta give credit when it's not one of my ideas. It's almost reminiscent of the sort of things we heard to justify invading Iraq. That Saddam is gassing his own people. Putin is he's trying to assassinate his former agents. He's meddling in elections and stuff. This is someone that we need to overthrow. And while, yes, there's a degree of truth to it, and Vladimir Putin certainly isn't the best actor by any means. He's not a crazed dictator that demands immediate action either. He's not like some sort of Hitler figure. And again, that's how the war in Iraq, was it Gulf War II that they had the pulling babies out of incubators story?
I don't recall that one. But then again, my knowledge of the I was gonna say just my knowledge of the Gulf War is kind of minimal. But with Iraq, the thing is that we had known Saddam he had chemical weaponry for ages. I mean, the Al-Anfar massacre is the prime example when he gassed the Kurds, killed hundreds of thousands of his own people with chemical weapons. So he'd had WMDs for the longest time. Oh, real quick, I should probably specify something. So I won't call myself an expert on the Iraq War, but I have friends who served over there. We have people in the audience who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I've done my research. I've talked to people who were there, and one thing that needs to be mentioned is that when it comes to UN definitions, which is what the United States was going off of to justify the invasion, UN definitions of a WMD, what are they? They are any sort of weapon that is chemical, biological, or nuclear. Saddam had used the first two. So and a lot of people don't realize this, is that a mustard gas bomb is considered a WMD.
Right.
So that, I think, needs to be put out there first, because a lot of people will say, we didn't find any WMDs in Iraq, we didn't find any nukes, as if the first statement is just as specific as the second. We didn't find any nukes, though we did know that they were starting a nuclear program. So I think that needs to be specified. I get a lot of people who say some really weird shit about the Iraq War. But, anyway. Yeah, it's...
But the way this is being framed almost seems like a lead up to an outright armed conflict with Russia.
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
It can't happen. That's World War III scenario.
Yeah, say, do you want fallout? Because that's how you get fallout.
Yeah. But it seems like people want it, and, we got war hawks out there. Cough, cough, Madam Secretary, cough, cough.
We've got plenty on both sides of the aisle, and I don't really understand it. It's like, okay, sometimes war has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it comes to the point where it is unavoidable. With that said, you want to avoid it as much as possible.
Ideally, yes.
So...
I think it sort of stems from just Cold War mentality, though. Like, these people just can't let go of it.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them are older, in 70s, 80s in a lot of cases. It makes sense. But at the same time, fucking hell, the Soviet Union collapsed 27 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I did a video on neoconservatism not too long ago, and when I discussed neoconservatism, the one thing that I talked about when I was reading, like, from philosophers and writers that could be considered neoconservatism, is that the big fear is the fear of a new rival. A fear of another rival on par with Cold War USSR. Right now, we don't really have one, but if there's any nation that has the potential to be, it is Russia.
Or China.
China's kind of fallen apart economically. Russia is actually on the uptick. Not in a huge way, but in some way. And on top of that, the youth of Russia are all in with Putin. Largely poll numbers show that they have a favorable idea of Putin as opposed to a disfavorable one. The people who are older who remember communist Russia are not fans.
Well, that's the thing, though. The second largest political party in the Russian Federation is the Communist Party. So of course they're not going to want that. I mean, these are kids that the horror stories of the communist USSR. No, they don't. Of course they don't want that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes absolute sense that they would support what's the party? United Russia, I believe.
Yeah, because the fact of the matter is that Vladimir Putin, compared to a communist, really is the lesser of two evils, which is saying is saying something. It's like only communism could make Vladimir Putin look good.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Anyway, let's go ahead and move on.
Yes, let's. Okay, so there's a couple people who asked. This is both an entertainment and politics question, and gives me a chance to plug a article I wrote. So Chaos Sonic 1 and Autist Whisper both want to know about our thoughts on Trump going after video games, and people who dislike Trump changing their stance on video games when not too long ago they were saying that video games cause sexism. So, I wrote an article because I'm awesome, and Hatman edited the article because he's awesome, and Aiden Paladin gave me research to help out with the article because she's awesome, which ended up in an awesome article over at HollywoodandToto.com, written by none other than myself, that I can't remember the name of at the moment. But it was a response
Nice
to...
plug. Nice plug.
Yeah, I know. I am the king of plugging. Let me pull it up here. Okay, it's called No Violent Video Games Aren't Producing Young Shooters. And like I said, it's over at hollywoodandtoto.com. I will put it in the description of the video so that you guys can read it. But basically, it is safe to say that we are not fans of Trump's approach on this.
No.
My article was a response to Matt Walsh because he was agreeing with Trump on this. And the fact of the matter is that I read several studies while I was writing this, or doing the second draft of the article. And with what I read, there is zero conclusive evidence that video games cause people to be violent or desensitize them to violence. The reason being is that some people cannot account, or they refuse to account, rather, for the human mind's ability to compartmentalize. We also know it as suspension of disbelief. The idea of being able to separate yourself from reality when engaging with a fictional medium, to immerse yourself in that, and the ability to basically be able to tell the difference between that and real life. So, because some studies do not estimate that, the ones that come across as if video games do cause some sort of damage are reaching very hard for something to show, because they have an agenda. So, what you end up finding is that video games can cause a rise in levels of aggression. And during video games, people come across as less empathetic to creatures within the digital medium. Again, that's because of suspension of disbelief. The player is fully aware of the fact that they are playing a video game. So you will do things that, aren't what you would usually do. And there's a game called Bar Fight Simulator that's on PC and I think the PS4 for the VR headset. And in it, you start bar fights. So aside from me, though, how many gamers are gonna, is that like a reflection of their lives? And the only reason it's a reflection of mine is I used to be a bouncer. So, I don't know. I think that people are going off of a surface level, like the same thing that I accused Matt Walsh of, is they're going off of a surface level thought that one would think would lead you to come to the conclusion that video games could cause a negative effect for younger people, especially young adults. When you actually do the fucking research on it, pardon my French, you find that the opposite is true. And, Matt Walsh, and my whole thing towards him was that, he says that he's making a philosophical argument. My counter argument is that philosophy does not exist in a vacuum. So, and I'd like to think, just to finish the plugging, I'd like to think the article came out pretty good. What do you think, Hatman?
Oh, of course. I didn't have to rewrite the whole damn thing, so it's perfectly fine. Most stuff that not most stuff, but a lot of the stuff that I edit, I basically end up having to rewrite it. So it's not so much editing as it is a revamp, or really a second draft.
Yeah.
But as far as the people suddenly defending video games because Trump went after them, Trump has said as much since, I believe, 2012. I think that's like the earliest tweet on record we saw him talking about violent video games and and stuff like that. So this isn't anything new, but the hypocrisy is hilarious, but it's not unexpected.
Yeah, that I had a feeling that the instant Trump did something like that, people like Ben Kuchera and Jim Sterling and all these people are going to start saying, "Oh no, video games don't cause violence." Well, they don't call it sexism either, but you were perfectly fine with somebody saying that. You didn't challenge her one bit.
I say once again, Stephen Colbert was the one who actually said it. If we're in agreement that video games don't cause violence, why do you say they cause sexism?
Yeah. Exactly. So, I kind of wish Stephen Colbert had hammered her harder on that point, but he just let it go.
Well, it was a promotional gig. It wasn't.
Yeah. Because respect women!
Mm-hmm.
And just as a side note, fuck John Oliver again.
Yes. Very fuck John Oliver.
Alright, next question. What are our thoughts on Kyle Khrushchev? I don't know.
Khrushchev. Well, he's got a good head on his shoulders at least. He's not constantly espousing the same talking points over and over again.
Yeah. Let me say this. He's young. He's very young.
Yeah.
And as the last two podcasts will tell you, I'm very skeptical of younger people. It's because I'm an old fart, I guess. At 32 years old, I have entered old fart status. I have the dentures to prove it. But with young people like that, I fear that the right is going to turn this young man into the same kind of talking head that the left has done with his classmates.
Yeah.
Does he seem to be smarter than his classmates? Honestly, yes. With that said, I don't necessarily believe the youth should lead us either.
No.
Because I was young once, and I tried leading people, and I fucked up.
Everyone who is older has a story about how they were a stupid teenager.
Yes. Except for, surprisingly, Ben Shapiro, but he's some sort of weird wunderkind. So, I don't know how that works.
Something of the sort. But yeah, no.
But maybe it's... I think I know. Maybe it's because he's a... Jew! Had to find an excuse to hit the button.
Oh, lordy.
Anyway.
Yeah, don't weaponize the kids.
No. Malkev the Mad, ironically, he's asking us a question about mental health. Why is the mental health industry so radical feminist? I was looking into getting help for obsessive-compulsive disorder. I got the idea that the doctors would pin my issues on masculinity. I know Hatman's got some stories, but let me say some stories or just say a couple things real quick before he goes into his. First and foremost, one thing I would suggest is if your therapist says you being a man is the problem, walk out of the door and don't pay them.
Yeah.
I would just walk out the door, because that is a person with an agenda, and their agenda is not helping you better. It's turning you into something that they want you to be. That is not the point of therapy. That is not the point. That's not what a psychologist is supposed to do. Psychologists are supposed to help you grow and fix the issues that are keeping you from growing and keeping up with the rest of society. So,
on top of that, you have to establish a degree of trust with your therapist. And if your therapist is saying something like your masculinity is causing problems for you, that's not exactly someone that you want to trust. Yeah. Especially if they have a problem with your identity. That's no.
Yeah.
No.
Because here's the thing. If you were a gay person and you are wanting to know more about Christianity and you were talking to a pastor who said pray the gay away, I would tell you to walk out.
Yeah, I would too.
Because that pastor doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to that. I'd be like, yeah, well, I'm not even going to go into that topic. But point is that with that sort of idea, that's not the problem. People who try to insert this sort of mess into legitimate therapy end up making the situation worse. Second thing is that from my experience, there's not enough men that are getting into psychology because they fear and they might have an interest in it, but they fear that they're not going to make as much money as like a surgeon or something. In which case, I would say part of the reason that it's not becoming as big of a thing is partially because people aren't getting into it, and people aren't opening offices. And on top of that, there's a cultural stigma around psychology that needs to honestly go the fuck away. So
I would argue a different point, and this sort of leads into my story here. That men aren't getting into it because there is a massive overlap now with psychologists and other social workers with just outright sociology, the sociology that is dominated by the leftist ideology. And so men would not want to get into a field in which they are more or less demonized for their sex from the get-go. When you hear concepts like toxic masculinity make their ways into journals of psychology, something is very wrong. And I wouldn't blame any man for not wanting to enter the field because of that. I wouldn't at all. Why would you want to if you're going to be hated by your peers? But because there's such an overwhelming number of those people in those fields, yeah, naturally you're going to run into them at one point or another. My girlfriend used to be in social work, specifically taking care of people with very severe mental disorders. We're talking like paranoid schizophrenics, even. And she had to walk away from it because she was being demonized for being a white girl. Just for being white among her peers, the people that she worked with. She couldn't understand what some of the people were going through because she was white. And so she did not have a right to treat them or assist them. That's fucking wrong. That's absolutely wrong. But that's what's happening now. And that's a damn shame. That's a perversion of the science.
not to mention when I was doing my research for Men's Issues Week, there was a there was one thing that I had seen from several psychologists was that funding for such things is anemic because, or just in regards to mental health in general, is anemic because far too many young people, or one thing that they would have to do to study the issues that are going on within men specifically is they would have to study gender differences. And there's a lot of resistance from that in politics right now. If we lived in a much more sane time, I mean, this would be an easy thing. There's so many things that if I could have a one-on-one conversation with the president that I would sit down and talk to him about, and one thing would be mental health. He seems to be somewhat cognizant of the issues, but it's not part of his agenda to really work on that, and I really wish it was. If it was, I would be wearing a MAGA hat fucking everywhere. I'd wear one to work. And I'm not supposed to wear hats to work unless it's a company one. I wouldn't give a shit. I'd be like, this guy gets it. Alright, I think that's it for politics. We have 2 for entertainment. Why this was asked, I don't know. I've told these folks I'm not a weeb. I'm not the kind of person who's a fan of this sort of thing. But they asked anyway. Joseph Schur wants to know, what is our favorite hentai?
Whichever one I could watch for longer than 2 minutes.
My favorite hentai is Devilman Crybaby. Now leave me alone. There are parts of that show that might as fucking well be softcore porn. I mean, dear God, I've been rewatching it, and I've come to the conclusion. Have you watched it yet, Hatman?
No, I haven't.
You should, because it is good. I will admit that. But there's like there's There's one character in the story named Miki Kuroda, and she is a curvier girl, to say the least. But when she becomes a Devilman, her boobs go from big for a girl her size to howitzers.
Jesus.
So I guess satanic possession, if you're a guy, just makes you super horny and aggressive. With a girl, if you ever wanted an upgrade, ladies, go Satan? I don't know.
Succubus tier.
I guess so, man. Like, I don't know how she runs with those damn things. She should, like, smack herself in the face and knock herself out. It said like in some promotional thing that her cup size was a D. I'm like, all right, pal. I've held D's. I have felt D's. I have seen them. Those aren't D's. Those are like F's. But anyway, no, I don't watch that kind of shit. Give me a break, guys. Come on. And final question of the day. Eclectic 1995 wants to know, some fans are speculating that Shuri could possibly be the MCU version of Ironheart if Tony Stark were to die in Infinity War. What are our thoughts on that speculation? I am not convinced that they are going to kill off Iron Man.
I am.
And even if they do, I don't think it'll be permanent.
I am.
Okay, why do you think so?
Because I think it's a good bookend. They say like this is the end of the MCU as you know it, like the end of this 10-year plan basically. Starts and ends with Tony Stark. It's a bookend in classic storytelling technique. And I think that's the reason why Steve Rogers will fight it too, because the first Avenger is also, you know, the first one to die, I would say. You know, it just from a storytelling perspective, it makes sense. That, and you know, their contracts are running out. They can't keep doing, you know, Marvel movies forever. So it makes sense. And, you know, you've got some people to replace him, at least for Captain America. I don't know about Iron Man. If they are going with Shuri as Ironheart route, which I don't think they'll do because that's a very, very new character. I think they would have Rhodey take over primarily, since, you know, War Machine is about as close as you can get to Iron Man right now. But I'm not opposed to the idea of Shuri being Ironheart, but mostly because Riri Williams is a pants on head retarded character.
Yeah, I'm not incredibly sold on that idea either. The main reason I don't think that we're actually going to see that many people permanently die is because they're going to see the opening figures for Infinity War. I'm still convinced it's going to be the biggest film of all time. And they're going to see how much money their bonuses were, and they're going to go, oh, I think I could do more. Because if nobody's read the series that these are based on, Infinity and Infinity Gauntlet, a lot of people die. In fact, everyone dies.
Yeah,
in those stories. I have a feeling the exact same thing is going to happen, and then they're going to get brought back. And I think that what we will see in the future is we will probably see certain characters having less of an appearance in the films, because they're probably going to, like, the plans in the future are, or from what we have heard, they're keeping a pretty tight lip on everything, is that there is going to be another Guardians movie that's already been confirmed. There's going to be Captain Marvel. There is going to be a Black Widow film. And
second Spider-Man.
Another Spider-Man. Hawkeye is apparently going to be in the Black Widow film, so he's still going to be around. I have a feeling what's going to happen is they're going to start developing the more secondary characters and giving them a shot at their own films, with Spider-Man sort of being their headliner. as opposed to having Cap and Iron Man being the headliner. But they're also considering doing another Thor film. There's talk about it's going to be the Beta Ray Bill story, which Hatman and I are very excited for.
Yes.
So I have this feeling that what's probably going to end up happening is that like Iron Man and Captain America will probably still be around. But they will probably be sitting back a bit, because Chris Evans has admitted to having a bit of fatigue and he's looking to have a bit of a break. So has Robert Downey Jr. But the idea that they're going to step away from these films that, for better or worse, have revitalized both their careers and their checkbooks, I'm not convinced yet. But we'll see what happens. I mean, we've only got a few weeks until that Infinity War comes out.
Yep.
So I am very excited about that, just because we're going to see, in my opinion, the greatest villain in comic book history, not only on the silver screen, but as completely showcased. Because he's been on the screen before, but completely showcased in this. Because I've been waiting for this since Avengers and the post-credit scene where we saw Thanos for the first time. I've been teased and teased and teased for years now. I am ready for him to destroy everything. So,
enough of the foreplay. Let's get to it.
Exactly. Well, on that note, we have worked our way through all the questions. One thing just to mention to the audience when you're seeing this is, yes, we are moving Micah and the Hatman to the weekends now, because it fits a lot better with Hatman's current schedule. It will probably work much better for us in the future. It works pretty well for me as well, because I can just do it before I go in for work, and so on and so forth. So just keep an eye out for us. And if you're one thing just to say, guys, if you're enjoying videos, please consider sharing it wherever. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. There are some subreddits that you could share our work on. You could put the politics podcast. You could put it on the conservative subreddit or the Donald or what have you. And I have a feeling people would come in and watch, and we can still have interesting discussions and so on and so forth. On top of that, we are looking to get a guest for the next podcast as well, but we're going to keep that under wraps. We'll see what happens there, because we want to talk about some stuff that's going on over across the pond for sure. So, Hatman, any final words? Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, I said final words. What do you got?
Oh, I don't know. You just sort of went silent. Final words? I don't know. I don't really have any, I don't think.
Well, for me, what I've got is this. Fuck the UK. My name is Micah Curtis.
And I'm Alex Baldwin, also known as the Hatman.
And we will see you guys next week. Dave's Vault.
Dave's Vault.